What's up, boys and girls? I'm back talking about more Model Y. Didn't actually think I'd be talking so much about this car, but I'm happy to help some folks who have questions about the vehicle, as well as sort of my thought process with everything. Hey, by the way, I'm recording this from my laptop, and so the sound is kind of crappy. Please bear with me. So anyway, just wanted to chat real quick about why I chose the Model Y standard all-wheel drive, standard range all-wheel drive, and not the long range. It wasn't necessarily about the money, but it is a $4,000 difference roughly. I've been driving EVs since 2013, so by no means am I kind of a stranger to electric vehicle and especially charging them on the go. So for me, having a range of 269 is the induction wheels, 279 is the regular 19-inch. It's really a non-issue for me. And even though, 90% of that, even if you have to charge it 85% or 90% every day, you're still over 230, 240 miles on a single charge. So I'm used to having 100 miles on my battery electric vehicles, and I even found that to be adequate depending on your use case, okay? So, and I'll go into the range issue a little bit later once we talk about route planning for long trips, because quite frankly, if you have a 100 or 240-ish commute each day, every day, you might want to find a new job because that's got to be super stressful. So anyway, speaking about range, used Model S actually has much less range than even the 279 miles. Used Model S these days, something that's 10 years old, you'll be lucky to get 200 plus, maybe 230 on something like that. So you see a bunch of these cars on the road every single day, especially if you're out here in California, and they're getting much less range. So I think that range anxiety is really kind of a new EV owner kind of thing, but once you get used to it and once you learn how to route properly and plan, and it really doesn't require many brain cells, I think you'll be totally fine. So also, if you were eligible for any of the tax credits, the Model Y all-wheel drive standard range has a 4680 battery. So the key with this is it is 100% made in the United States. At least we think it will qualify as being 100% eligible for this full rebate. So that seems to be the assumption at the moment, where if you get the long range or the performance, I believe those it's a little bit unsure about how those batteries will fully qualify and be eligible. As you guys know, there's some wacky rules around what makes it eligible for the full thing, even though those are built in, those battery packs are built in Giga Nevada, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to go to it, but the consensus seems to be that the 4680 should be eligible for the 100% 77.5K after March. Now, another reason why I went with the premium interior, the Model Y standard range, is it comes with the same premium interior, it comes with the same premium sound system as both the performance and the long range. So also, it's an all-wheel drive. It's not the rear-wheel drive that was previously offered in the early years of the Model Y. And I think that one only got 230 or so range with the rear-wheel drive, which, you charge it to 80, 90%, you're under 200 at that point. I just wanted to share some of the resources that I use to learn more about this particular Austin build and the 4680 structural battery pack, and sort of why it's such a different car inherently than the other Model Ys produced, even in Austin, but also at Fremont, which are the long range and the performance models. So if you wanted to learn a lot more about the 4680 actual battery cells and the technology of the battery cell and the battery pack itself, Cleaner Watt, this gentleman has really great technical knowledge, and if you want to nerd out on a bunch of the reasons why the 4680 was produced or is being produced and Tesla's reasons behind it, but also what the hype is and where the false narratives are and all these things. He really just gets down to the bare bones, and you get to really learn what it's about, why it's advantageous and why it's not. So the limiting factor, this is another YouTube channel that went through and actually got one of the first 4680 teardown cells that these folks, Monroe Live, took off and they started selling piece by piece the individual cells that came out of this structural battery pack down here, and the limiting factor bought one, and he sent it to UC San Diego, and had it fully tested to figure out what was the kilowatt hour size and energy capacity and all these other things. So these three folks were really a big resource for me in getting to know what were some of the truths and some of the rumors on the structural battery pack. So one of the reasons why I was really excited about this Austin build Model Y was, being a kind of a car enthusiast myself, I have had my fair share of tearing apart cars down to the bare nuts and bolts, and you really get to see how cars are put together, and why I was excited about Tesla's approach to putting this car together. And it's really, honestly, it's really like no one else out there who is able to mass produce this kind of thing. And there's a short clip here of the folks at Monroe and what they thought about it. So just listen to this real quick.
Now, the first thing I want to say is that it's absolutely mind-blowing to be standing under a vehicle on a hoist and have absolutely nothing for the floor structure. At Monroe & Associates, we've seen the evolution of the automotive industry for the past 30 to 40 years. Myself, with 17 years at Monroe & Associates, I've come from a background of benchmarking vehicles where you'd have hundreds of stamp parts for where this front giga casting is, hundreds and hundreds of parts in the back. And the level of refinement and integration is incredible. And before we get into where the battery interface is, Tesla is not wasting any opportunity to integrate the casting for multiple mounting features.
What he's really talking about here probably is best illustrated by this photo. So over to the right is the new Model Y Austin 4680 structural pack frame. And over to the left is a Model 3, but it's very reminiscent of the Fremont builds right now. So that's long range and performance. So you can see all these different colors are different individual structural pieces that are essentially glued together or welded together or bolted together or through some kind of structural adhesive. So you can see the difference here, whereby the giga castings is just two pieces. So it's this main giga casting subframe and the rear giga casting subframe. So these are basically originated from huge aluminum alloy ingots probably that just get pressed into these intricate shapes from a massive X million ton press or whatever to produce these castings. And what this does is it keeps everything consistent. It keeps all your mounting points consistent. But not only that, it's a very, very structurally rigid piece because it's all one piece, right? Instead of having multiple pieces being essentially fused together, whereby any given robot or any given human could have some tolerance, a much higher tolerance for error with the way these put together. So panels are looser put together, panel gaps will be higher, et cetera, et cetera. It's kind of a domino effect, as opposed to if you start from a frame that is nearly perfect to begin with, and whatever you bolt on top of it is going to fit much better the first time. So what ties these two frame pieces together is a structural body pack. So that is a structural piece whereby the actual casing and the batteries themselves is structurally designed. And what there's no real picture here. I don't have a picture of it, but Monroe goes through and does a full teardown of what is inside that structural body pack and why it's like super stiff. So that is, that is basically bolted or maybe fused together, and it fuses the front and the rear. So it really kind of reminds me of the way modern McLarens are built. You have aluminum frame on the front, or this is essentially, this is the front, an aluminum frame in the rear. Even though this isn't a gigacast, these are still, welded or seamed or fused together frames that gets bolted into a central carbon monocoque. So it's like a three-piece setup. It's actually really cool. Here's another photo of it. So in essence, these were some of the reasons why I wanted to get the 4680. I was kind of pumped about that new architecture. And, I don't know if I mentioned this, but a better frame design means less rattles, less squeaks. Body panels are much straighter. Things just fit together better. So in the long run, that should be a good thing. Oh, one more thing too is you can see this whole piece right here is I believe part of the massive giga casting. And so when you have your suspension components being mounted into a very stiff structural piece, then it allows the dampers and the springs and all the bushings and everything to work together much better because there's a lot less flex in the chassis itself. So there's quite a lot of advantages that I think, maybe non-car guys may not appreciate, but I certainly do. There is one unknown that I have a question about in terms of a disadvantage of having the structural body pack, battery pack, and the gigacasting, is because if you do get an accident and insurance, there's a much higher likelihood that the insurance company will total this car. Because just imagine if you get hit on this side, if you get hit somewhere in the back, and there's any tweak at all to this, huge piece of gigacasting, or this huge piece back here of gigacasting, then it's virtually probably going to be impossible to fix without having to total the whole car. I don't think the insurance companies have really caught on to that yet. We won't really see that kind of data until these things starts to get wrecked and that data gets compiled. But I do think that that is a disadvantage of having the gigacasted kind of Model Ys. I have experience in this because it's very similar in structure to the BMW i3 that I had, where that whole body was a composite carbon fiber essentially. So, if it was damaged in any way, it was kind of a write-off for the whole frame. So that's something to consider. Let's talk about why range may or may not be important to you. Like I said, I got the standard range because for me it's perfectly fine and it fit my needs for 98% of the driving that I do. So what happens for me with the 2% of the driving that I do? Well, let me show you guys. So here's an example. I opened up a better route planner. Now we're in LA, and if let's say you wanted to go to Vegas, right? So that's a very standard, very common trip that Angelinos make. Although I honestly haven't made this trip in a few years. We've just been flying whenever we wanted to go to Vegas. So this kind of doesn't apply to me. So again, but it's just to give you an idea. This could very well be, New York to Boston or LA to San Francisco or whatever, right? So right now I have it configured for the 4680 standard range, so the time is going to take 4 hours and 30 minutes with 2 stops, one being 5-minute charge and the other being a 13-minute charge. And because it's a Tesla, it's super awesome at route planning, and it does it all for you. Now, if you get a long range, here's the difference. You save about 15 minutes from 4 hours 31 minutes to 4 hours and 15 minutes. So then you only have one stop that's 11 minutes long. So I personally have to pee once, at least once, maybe most likely twice for that trip, but I often, enjoy stopping multiple times on a trip like this. I don't want to just take it one huge stretch. So is that savings of, another 5-minute stop or a 15-minute break really worth the extra $4,000? Sure, maybe to some of you it totally is. You want that extra flexibility, totally get it, that's fine. I'm not in that boat. I'd rather spend the $4,000 on some other funner stuff that gets a better bang for my buck. So this use case doesn't really appeal to me because you do drive a Tesla and I don't mind stopping a 5-minute stop here and a 13-minute stop there. So in reality, this is probably going to be a lunch stop, or one of these are going to be a lunch stop or a dinner stop somewhere. And this is going to be a much longer charge to where I can make it just a one-stop kind of trip, right? So those things I don't think many folks fully consider. I think it's always nice to be safe, and you want to spend the extra $4,000 to be safe. But maybe if you have a different mindset about it, you may not need it. All right. So anyway, those were just. I'm sure there are a bunch more reasons why I decided to stick with the standard range, but I actually wasn't even interested in a Model Y at all until I found out that they had the standard range available. So that's just my 2 cents. I hope it helps you guys, and let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.